Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. A bizarre and terrifying story today in the Chicago suburbs of Arlington Heights and Elk Grove Village. A 12-year-old girl and two men who were brothers are dead after taking poison capsules of extra-strength Tylenol.
Fall of 1982, the Tylenol poisonings occurred. The first thing that popped into my head was, how could this possibly have happened at our plant?
A warning against the use of Tylenol.
No one knew for days if the poisoned bottles were limited to Chicago. But even as the police and FBI began to search for clues, Jim Burke already had concluded that all Tylenol capsules, not just those in Chicago, but nationwide, should be recalled.
Johnson & Johnson will no longer manufacture or sell any capsule products made directly available to the consumer. While this decision is a financial burden to us, it does not begin to compare to the loss suffered by the family and friends of Diane Ellsroth. On behalf of the entire Johnson & Johnson organization, I have expressed our heartfelt sympathy to Diane's family and loved ones.
We asked James Burke, Chief Executive Officer at Johnson & Johnson, to let us watch behind the scenes as the story developed, and he agreed.
Let me take you through the logical sequence. Number one, this shows us very clearly the consumer was waiting to hear from us, and when she heard from us, she responded positively. Great. No question about it. So until we bring the third leg in, which is commercial television advertising, we're not using all the weapons available to us.
What she is saying is that she needs reassurance, and we're giving it to her. What she's saying is the most positive reassurance you can give me is a tamper-resistant package, and we're going to give it to her. And what she's saying, in spite of that, and we have to track this as we go, is that deep down I'm concerned. Your conclusion is, since she's concerned, we ought to go out and sell her. There's nothing more offensive to me if I'm frightened than somebody tell me I ought to buy their product, and I know I ought to buy it, and I feel I ought to buy it, but I can't.
Well, I got a lot of credit for that. But the fact is, my job was made not only simple, but there wasn't anything else I could have done. Every person who worked for Johnson & Johnson in the world was watching the poisonings.
The Food and Drug Administration...
You couldn't get off an airplane in any country in the world without having your baggage searched for Tylenol. If we had done anything other than what we did, think of how those employees would have felt. I mean, the very soul of the corporation was watching us. The other thing I did that I think helped was I decided to talk to the heads of news of all of the networks alone. And by the way, the lawyers hated the fact I was doing it because they didn't know what our obligations were legally. And they were very, very opposed to it, and Larry Foster was opposed. Everybody was opposed to it.
Okay.
I think that may have been intuitively one of the best things I did, because I built a relationship with the heads of news and the networks. And they called me day and night when they felt the need to. They didn't bother me.
One network told me that 20% of their news for the first 8 days
I had a
following the tampering was on this story.
an implicit faith in the media,
and I would not
which probably was somewhat unique, because most people don't. Didn't then, and less so now. But I had felt that as long as the public was at stake, the media would behave extremely well, and they did.
Johnson & Johnson announced its new safety packaging.
This package has 3 separate barriers to entry and affords the public the best protection we could reasonably devise. The outer box has glued flaps. Then there's a red seal, as you can see, around the outside, which is the second barrier. And then that's...
All right, look at that.
And that's the third barrier, which is a... Thank you.
This will obviously cause a rise in the price of the product.
No, we're going to absorb the price because we think it's good business too.
We had to make hundreds of decisions on the fly. Hundreds of people made thousands of decisions. If you look back, we didn't make any bad decisions. Really, we really didn't. those thousands of decisions all had a splendid consistency about them, and that was that the public was going to be served first, because that's who was at stake. So the reason people talk about Tylenol when the Corto discussions come up is that the Corto ran that. Because the hearts and minds of the people who were Johnson & Johnson and who were making the decisions in a whole series of disparate companies. We organized every company in the United States to help solve the problem. They all knew what to do. All of the previous managements who built this corporation handed us on a silver platter the most powerful tool you could possibly have. And the thing that worries me most is that people don't understand that to the extent that they ought to. I was often asked, just because of the Tylenol affair, to talk about ethics. And I start by saying I'm not going to talk much about ethics. I'm going to talk about trust. All of you have relationships, whether it's with a significant other or someone you're married to or your sibling or friends. And those relationships are built on trust. Once you lose that trust, the relationship's gone.